Hello, everyone. I think we are live. Yes. Okay, I think we are live. Welcome, everyone who has joined our Product People live stream today. And I think we will wait for another minute or so to let people join. Okay, yeah, let's just start. People can drop in, of course, later on as well. So hello and welcome to another Product People live stream, and thank you for joining us today. Throughout our session today, you will be able to ask questions and answer our poll with our Slido code that you can see on the screen. You can either go to slido.com and enter the code that you can see on the right side, or you can scan the QR code on the left with your phone. And you will also have the opportunity to go there later as well. We will show that throughout the presentation. So our guest today is Gil Coelho. Sorry for my pronunciation. I don't speak Portuguese. Let's hope I can keep that throughout the stream. Yeah, he's head of product at Unbabel, and he will be talking about his quite remarkable journey from intern to product leadership in just a couple of years. And oh, sorry, I didn't switch the slides. Yeah. Then very briefly about myself. So my name is Kerstin. I'm working at Product People, and I will be your host today. You can look at my CV here if you're interested, but I will not really go through all of it. In short, I have worked as an individual contributor in product and project management for a few years already in different industry, and yeah, still love working in product and tech. Hopefully this will not change in the upcoming years. And briefly about Product People and what we do as well. So our mission is to help companies discover and deliver great products faster. And we empower our product management community to share knowledge generously while managing the hands-on work of product managers, owners, ops, or product leaders on a fractional basis. So that's how we make money. And we onboard fast, align teams, and deliver outcomes thanks to our in-house team. We also create free events like this one for one of the biggest PM communities in Europe for you. So let's start with an icebreaker before we actually start the session. So once again, you can scan the QR code on the right side or go to slido.com and enter the code in the top right corner. And we have a question for you. So for the ones watching on other platforms, feel free to share your answers in the comments as well. And the question for you is, if you could go back to an earlier stage in your product journey, what would you do differently? Seek mentorship sooner, say no to the things that were aligned with my goals, focus more on business impact than output, learn to communicate with stakeholders better, or something different, then please leave a comment. We are curious. So I see there are questions, answers coming in.
I know that I would do a lot of things differently. There's a lot of mistakes. I think that's true for all of us.
Everyone probably.
Curious to see what
I
are
want
the
to meet the
answers.
person that does not regret anything. Yeah, interestingly, on top currently is seek mentorship sooner.
Oh,
I can relate to that. Let's give it a few more seconds to
actually,
see if
well,
more
while we
votes
wait
come in.
for answers, I was looking, Kirsten, at your CV. Here. Did you study philology? Is that how you say it?
Yes, it's German philology. That's what I studied in
Okay,
my
that's super
bachelor's.
interesting. It's a super interesting path to product.
Yes, it's a bit different, I would say, but you learn to deal with ambiguity in the humanities, I guess, because there are not so many hard facts.
Yeah, it's definitely a very important skill for product. So super glad to
Yes,
see that profile. Congratulations.
thank you. So, yeah, still the top runner, seek mentorship sooner, and in the second place, learn to communicate with stakeholders better. That's always a good skill to have. Okay, then let's switch over to our guest today. So I already introduced you, Gil. He's the head of product at Unbabel, a technology scale-up in the AI translation space. Starting as an intern, Gil rose through the ranks to join the executive team. Quite remarkable, I have to say. With a background in engineering and management, he brings a structured yet entrepreneurial mindset to product leadership. At Unbabel, he has led product strategy across core offerings and navigated the industry change from human to human plus AI and AI only. I will hand over to you now and stop sharing my screen. And the stage is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kirsten. Okay, wonderful. So, first of all, hi everyone. It's great to be here. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully, you can see it. Um, Okay, wonderful. So, hi everyone. My name is Gil, and today I'm going to be talking a little about my path from intern to product leader. Do take everything with a grain of salt. This is just my experience, and I wanted to share some of the reflections and learnings, and potentially some of the core mindsets that I try to apply at different stages of my career. And hopefully, some of these is useful to you. So, do take it, break it, change it, and see if anything is useful to you. Hopefully, it is. I'm super glad and super eager to see if there's anything that relates and also to hear any questions. Also, thank you to product people for inviting me over to give this talk. Okay, so just to give you some more context about me, so my name is Gilles. I work at Unbabel, and just to expand a little bit more on what Unbabel does, so we do translation. The short answer is we make it easy to operate in multiple languages. So let's say that if you are a large organization, you potentially have a team, maybe let's say in London or in Lisbon or any other city, and that team presumably speaks one language, maybe two. If you're super lucky, they might speak three languages, but they definitely don't speak all the languages that your customers speak. And that's the problem that we're solving at Babel. We help large organizations reach their customers in their own native language. So when you think of experiences with, for example, booking or electronic arts, so really large organizations that have customers all across the world and they have more than 20, sometimes 30 languages, we help them operate in these different markets. And the how we do that is also quite interesting, at least in my very biased opinion, is we use a combination of human and AI. So we've been very deep on AI for a really long time, for more than 10 years. We work with neural machine translation and recently also with large language models. So we have our own models and we always use state-of-the-art artificial intelligence for translation. What we then do is when required, we then escalate these translations to humans so that they can improve. And in doing that, we also create a feedback loop with AI. So there's this really interesting interplay of human and AI. Um, and basically, we use that to allow companies to operate at a really large scale. And that's why we're translating roughly around 9 billion words per year. So a lot of words. That's in Babel. I think it's a quite interesting place to be. I'm super lucky to be here. And basically, my path here was that I joined as an intern in late 2019. I worked on some projects and I started getting interested in product. So I started approaching product. And then I started working as a junior product manager on what we call the Unbabel portal, which is the main interface that our customers use to interact with Unbabel. And we were just launching it, so it was a great experience to be able to be part of the launch of a product that was quite important for the company. So I also worked a little bit more with the designers, with UI, with front end. Um, that experience was great. I then started taking over more features and more sections of the product, eventually working with the portal, but also with a lot of the logic that we had, with the pricing, with our subscription structure. So I started to enlarge my experience and also work a little bit in other product areas. Eventually, I also worked a little bit on our logic of workflows. Do I send these to humans? Do I keep these with AI only? What are the tools that our teams use? And a little bit more than 1 year ago, I was invited to lead the product team, meaning that I lead the product management, the product design function, and within the leadership team, I am responsible and I own the product strategy and the direction and the strategy and reporting directly to the CEO. So it's been a super fun path. And hopefully, I can share some of the learnings and reflections of the different stages. And the most structured way that I found to do this, hopefully it's helpful, is to sort of split the presentation into three main sections. So, first, what are the main things that you can be thinking about when you are a junior product manager? What are the core principles in which you should be focusing on? And then, as an intermediate or potentially a senior product manager, what are the core things in which you should be focusing to get to the next level? And then as a product leader, what are the core things that you should be focusing on? And I really do think you can look at these a little bit in a zoom out, so you can think of your career and sort of take these box for each stage of your career. But I also think it's useful to use this framework to think of your path within a specific organization. So if, for example, the first few months in an organization, you're always having to ramp up to get knowledge, so some of the learnings on the junior actually might be useful. Even if you're a super senior person, I think these can be useful for you to think both at the career level, but also at an organization level as you do this path. Okay, let's get to it. So, starting out, you are a junior product manager. First of all, congratulations. I think you have a super cool job. So I'm, of course, very biased, but I think we have a very interesting role. And this is the most common question that I get. What should I focus on as a junior product manager? And I think there's an inherent challenge to being a junior product manager because product management is strategic almost by definition, right? Product management is about building the right thing. And building the right thing, knowing what the right thing is, requires competition knowledge, market knowledge, technology knowledge. It requires all of these components that you might not have yet. So it's really hard when you're a junior. How do you actually go and how do you actually get stuff done? And here, the core principle, and maybe it sounds overly simplistic, is I would advise you to start by making everyone's lives easier. And this sounds very basic, but the reality is that if you're not yet helping on building the right product because you don't have the knowledge to steer that direction, the very least that you can do is to help the team ship the product. And that means helping with all the small things, all the friction points that you have as a team, and that prevent you from being faster, from delivering more, from delivering better. And effectively, what you're doing when you're just helping the team, and I mean all of the team, it could be the engineers, yes, could also be the success managers, the account managers, whomever you work with. If you're helping them, you're making the team faster. And what's effectively happening is you are trading what you have in abundance. So I'm talking about time, about energy, enthusiasm. You really want to drive change for the things that you are seeking and that you need to reach the next level as a product manager, which is knowledge, credibility, relationships. And we'll look at how that actually happens. So, if we look at actual concrete things that you can do, try to be the solution. And that can look like picking up the boring stuff. I know this doesn't sound like the most exciting advice ever, but the reality is, if you just joined, potentially there's a lot of small things that the team knows they should be doing, but they're not doing them because they're busy or because it's a bit of boring task, but they know they would improve everyone's lives. So, for example, let's say that every time there's a meeting, no one remembers to add an agenda. And everyone knows that an agenda would help, It would make the meeting a little bit more organized. It would potentially save you 20% of the time instead of juggling and at the beginning to understand what's the structure that you're going to follow. But also, no one does it because they're busy. It's a bit boring. Well, potentially as a junior, why don't you pick that up? And in doing that, if you are starting to drive the agenda or at least structuring the agenda as a junior, you're forced to get context on what's happening, structure your ideas, get context from the different stakeholders so that you start learning. So, what sounds like picking up something boring and very small actually gives you a little bit more knowledge. And if you sort of compound these over many, many different actions, you really start to build up the knowledge and the credibility that you need to get to the next stage of your career. The second thing that's quite relevant is don't ask for permission on everything, particularly if you're being helpful, right? Don't go like, oh, can I, like, if you see that the agenda is missing, go for it. And don't wait for the title to start doing things that are useful for the team. We're all very busy professionals, right? And I'm sure the professionals around you are the same. If you can make their lives a little bit easier, they will appreciate it. So don't ask for permission, rather be proactive and in helping and in solving the small things that you see. And then finally, but potentially most importantly, build reliability. One thing that does not require knowledge, product knowledge, industry knowledge, a lot of skills is just being reliable. And it is potentially the most important thing for you to advance professionally. If people know that when they talk to you, you're going to have follow through, when they agree on an action with you, you are going to deliver it, they will start to trust you. And that trust is much more important than any other just spark of brilliant innovation that you try to bring to the team. If they know that work actually gets done. And that might be as simple as every time you have a meeting, you're bringing your notebook and you're pointing and you're taking note of that action that you've agreed. And really making sure that if you've agreed on an action, you're not going to let it fall through the cracks. You're not going to forget it. And if it's delayed, you'll let the person know. This sounds really basic, but the reality is that as busy professionals, we have a lot of things flying over. We have meetings, things are relevant, then they're no longer relevant. As a junior, you're shielded from some of these things. You don't have as many meetings, as much context, as much chaos. So, what you can do is really become an ultra reliable person. And this is fundamental because people will start to trust you. You'll build those relationships, and those stakeholder skills are super important for your next stage of your career. And let's look at some actual concrete examples, so that it's not just all theoretical. So one of the things that I did, for example, when I was a junior and we were launching the Unbabel portal, as I mentioned, is there were a lot of questions. It was a brand new product. It was different from what we had before. And so account managers, engineers, everyone around the organization had a lot of questions. And of course, we had documentation, but it wasn't enough. That's normal. It's things are never as good as at first. So what I did is I spent some time actually learning from the engineers. Maybe I took the questions from the account managers that were asking. I tried to understand them, and I tried to only ask it once to the engineers so that I wouldn't bother them too much. And then after a few weeks, I had gathered enough knowledge that I could actually build a reliable knowledge base that was now the foundation for how people handle that. And that sounds super simple, right? Oh, just build FAQs. But the reality is, I'm pretty sure that in your organization, there's something simple like that that's not done because people are too busy. As a junior, see that as an opportunity. Another concrete example sounds small, is impactful. One team member that I have, that she's amazing. When she joined, of course, she had her onboarding documentation. But one thing that was a bit weird for her were the acronyms. We used a lot of acronyms like CAT tool or CSAT. And that's something that she had to pick up over time. Well, what she did is every time she heard an acronym, she would actually add it to a glossary that she had. And afterwards, when a new team member joined our team, she shared the glossary. So she built knowledge and she did a thing that maybe other people didn't have the patience to do, a glossary just for new people to understand the acronyms. But she did that. And of course, we recognize that. And it's a small thing that starts to build your credibility as a professional. So there's a lot of small things that you can do. And in doing those small things, you're, as I mentioned, really trading your time and energy, because you have a lot of those in the beginning, for these little bits of knowledge, because if you've built the FAQs, now you have a lot of product knowledge. Because if you did the onboarding material, now people who onboard know that you're someone who can help them. So you really just did an exchange, and you took from what you had, time, and now you have more knowledge, more credibility, more relationships. And hopefully, if everything goes well, then you're well on your path to becoming an intermediate product manager. And here it's a bit of a big box, being an intermediate, and here we can consider just being a mid-level, a senior. The core thing is, let's say you already know the organization in which you are. You can make great decisions. You have the product knowledge that you need. You have the industry knowledge that you need. But now you're asking, how do I go from here being mid-level to actually being having more impact in my organization, becoming a leader? How do I just go from all of these tasks and endless meetings that I have to really scaling the impact that I have in my organization? Well, I think the core thing to focus on when you really nailed the organization in which you worked and you really have that knowledge is to start thinking about, how do you find leverage? How do you scale your impact? How do you go from just individual decisions, small things, to amplifying the impact that you have in your organization? And some of the core things that you can focus on is, first of all, continue to have follow through. This is absolutely fundamental. I know it's repeated from the junior, but I cannot stress how important it is to have follow through, to be a reliable counterparty to your colleagues. So this is essential to continue your path. But then start thinking about how you can sort of automate or scale some of the impact that you have. And this doesn't have to look sexy, right? I know when we talk about automation, we go like, oh, I'm going to create a bot and this bot is going to do these and that, and eventually that workflow breaks. If you create that bot and if it uses AI and it's super automatic, brilliant. Please do that. I love that. But it can also be as simple as documenting. Documenting sounds like a boring thing, but it's actually a superpower, because when you document something, you ensure that it's going to be in the future, that knowledge can be passed with basically zero cost. If you have to answer the same question 5 times on Slack, every time you get the message, you go on Slack, you type the answer, you send it. Now, if you've documented the answer to that question, now you can just share that link and that answer can be answered 1,000 times without you spending more. So try to think how you can create leverage. Doesn't have to look sexy. If it does, even better. But try to see how you can increase that leverage. And typically, there's three main tools that you can use to create that leverage. One is processes. So if you see that doing something in a specific way makes it better, for example, collecting feedback. You notice that when you collect feedback about the product, it's super unstructured. People don't really give you the relevant information. Well, then what you're lacking is a process. What you need is, when people want to provide feedback, then you want to make sure that you get who is the user, what's their struggle, how are they currently solving the problem. And now, anytime you get feedback, if you give people the structure, they will give you better feedback. So that's a process. It could be a ritual. If, for example, you have that everyone is always asking, oh, what is the product roadmap? Or when can I ask questions about the product roadmap? Then what you probably need is a ritual, is a recurring way for you to meet with stakeholders and exchange information. Or you simply need an artifact. Could be a Google Doc, could be an Excel, could be a fancy bot, whatever suits you. Sort of try to find what solves each problem. And then the last step of creating this leverage and also becoming a better professional is make sure that you are creating self-improving systems. And by system, I mean yourself, your team, your organization. Better than just having these brilliant ideas or reading the latest product book with the best framework, or just taking all of Marty Kagan's ideas and bringing them to life. And I love Marty Kagan, by the way. But better than that is actually just making sure that you're incrementally better over time. Every sprint that passes, you reflect on what went wrong, what went right, and you sort of try to make less of what went wrong, a little bit more of what went right. And that incremental improvement over time will make you and your team much better. And if you take that philosophy, I am sure that you will succeed as a professional. So let's look at some concrete examples from my experience. Once again, sort of trying to not just be overly theoretical. So, rituals and processes that you can do. The customer insights is a good one. I already spoke about it, but we had that, right. I think this is a very common in the product teams. Is you're potentially getting feedback in the office. Someone is passing by and they go, "Oh, I love this feature," or "Actually, it was a bit annoying when I clicked there. That happened and I was confused." You get this type of feedback, but you also get it through email. You also get it through Slack. You also get it through Zoom calls. And suddenly you're losing the information that you have, because you're not storing it, and it's also super unstructured. Well, you can solve that. Just create a process. Maybe for us, it was just a Notion, where there's a template and people fill that template. And that way we ensure that one, it's structured, second, it's stored, and third, it's processed by us. So that's a simple way to solve that. Another one is the regular roadmap reviews. If all the stakeholders are always asking what is the roadmap or why did you choose that to be prioritized, then you're probably missing a ritual where you actually communicate to them the what you're doing and the why. And there's many other examples, but the main point is identify the problems that you have and use processes, rituals, and artifacts to solve your problems in a scalable way. And then the second part on the self improving system, this will sound very basic, but just doing retrospectives. Retrospectives are a very powerful tool for you to improve over time. But the most important part of the retrospectives is the action items part. It's very easy to run a retrospective with the team where you go at the end of the week or at the end of the sprint and you go to the team and you say, "Hey, so what went right? What went wrong?" And it becomes a rant session. You're just complaining about things that you don't like. And there's nothing wrong with rant sessions. In some ways, they're actually good to build some emotional connection with your colleagues. But if you don't get to the actions, they're just that, rant sessions. But if you actually make sure that every positive item and every negative item becomes an action for you to fulfill, and that action has a date, has an owner, has a concrete deliverable, then I am sure that as the weeks pass, you're going to become a better team. For example, if you reflect that you lost a lot of knowledge. You had a bunch of Zoom calls, but you didn't really capture it because you were so entertained in that meeting that you were not taking notes. So you had a lot of knowledge, but now you're annoyed, and the team is reflecting that you've lost a lot of relevant knowledge that could be used to improve the product. That's something that you put that on as a negative. We had great calls, but we lost information. Then take a concrete action. Maybe you're going to add whatever, an automatic note taker. Maybe there's always someone who joins the call to take notes. I don't know what it is. But the main point is that focus on the things that went right, the things that went wrong, and do and set concrete action items that will help you. And this is once again much more powerful than you going for the newest framework or just taking a random idea out of the book, because it's much more important for you to understand the specific challenges that your team has, that you have, rather than just taking an idea out of a random book. If a random book has a great idea on how to solve the problem you have, amazing. But as product people, we know, start from the problem, don't start from the solution. So I think these are some of the relevant things. Okay, so hopefully you've started to create more leverage by using processes, rituals, creating artifacts, and you have this great way to ensure that you are self-learning and self-improving over time. So you're well on your way to becoming a product leader. And as you become a product leader, I think things change a little bit. You really have to change your mindset from, hey, I'm an individual contributor, I make great decisions, I help my team, to really, as a product leader, you own a direction. So you might not even have a lot of necessarily context from above. You need to set the direction, the strategy, and you need to communicate this direction to the organization. You also need to design the organization itself. You're responsible for ensuring that the people with whom you work have the right context, have the right roles, have the right tools that they need to perform their job well. So you really transition from just potentially owning a product to owning a product organization. And that requires, you can take a lot of learnings, but it requires a different mindset. So some of the, let's say, core mistakes and maybe principles that can help you in this transition. The first thing is, when you become senior enough, it's very easy to be busy. It really is. It's very easy to go on autopilot and you start your day, you have that Zoom call, and then you have the other Zoom call, and then you jump and you're just reviewing this documentation, and then you have a bunch of emails that you're handling, and then the day ends and you've done a lot. But have you really? It's very easy to just go on autopilot and jump from meeting to meeting to meeting. But if you become senior enough, you really have to start taking ownership of your time and making deliberate choices about where you are spending your time. Because just being busy is not enough. You can spend all the time that you want and achieve very little for the organization. You can spend all day in meetings, but if you've set the wrong strategy and you're not adjusting to the market that's shifting, you're going to fail. So just, you really need, particularly at this stage, to stop looking at number of hours of work, at just looking at output, and actually evaluate, am I being impactful or am I just being busy? And a lot of times, for you to be able to achieve these, you have to start saying no. You have to say no to these meetings that are not useful. You have to say no to these processes, or you have to say no to all of these things that could be stealing your time. You need to be very intentional about where you're spending your time, because a lot of times the organization is going to reflect where you are spending your time. So if, for example, strategy is the most important thing right now, then your calendar should be reflecting that. And then a final principle is lead with context. So it's, when you're a leader, you have to understand your organization, and there's not a one size fits all solution. But it's very easy to go on one of the extremes. It's very easy to become a micromanager, because particularly if you've grown inside the organization, because you have the context, you might even know the engineers, you might even know the code, you know the problem. But that's not going to be useful, because your team is going to resent you. You're definitely not going to be able to spend enough time to really solve the problems well. So micromanaging is not going to work, but also the opposite is not going to work, where you just leave the team to do whatever and you give them no direction and no context. And I think the best balance is to ensure that you are providing enough context for your team to do the decisions that they need to make. So your job is to ensure that they have the tools, they have the data, they have the business goals for them to be able to make those decisions and actually move the business forward. Okay. And a concrete reflection here on the part of the product leader that relates to a lot of what we're talking about. When I think of a product leader, at least for me, you might actually be performing a few different roles, not just being the head of product or the director of product or the VP of product or the CPO, whatever your title is. You might have a few different roles inside your role. The first one, potentially most important, is you are a product strategist. So your main goal is to be able to define a vision and a strategy that will achieve the business outcomes that you're seeking. Product is nothing if it doesn't achieve business goals. So you need to be really centered on what are the main things that our business needs to achieve right now, and how do I, through the product, achieve that. This is where we're talking about, hey, the most important thing right now is revenue, or is retention, or it's cost, whatever. But you need to have a very clear idea of what are the core business metrics, and you need to set the path. How is the product going to influence that? And in concrete, this can look like writing strategy memos, choosing the OKRs for the team, and really guiding the company towards creating meaningful impact. So if your team should be able to tell you the how, but you should be telling them the what needs to be changed. Okay. The second thing that you need to do, and it's a very different job, is to be an org designer. So you're the one that is actually defining how the teams are structured and setting the expectations of how they work. So you shouldn't be micromanaging, but you should be setting the expectations of how well the product team works. So you shouldn't be telling the teams, oh, here's your roadmap, initiative A, B, and C. But it's very fair and actually very healthy that you say, hey, okay, how did you arrive at that roadmap? What's the data proof? how does that align with the goals that I gave you as the product strategist? So setting those how the team works is fundamental for you to ensure that you have a healthy organization. And it should be adjusted to the size of the organization, to the maturity of the people. But it's very important that you are also intentional about this, because setting how the org behaves is really setting the expectations of how you run the teams and how functional you are. And then the last part, very, very important, is you're a manager, presumably. People are reporting to you, either formally or informally, doesn't matter. And people are everything. So you need to be able to spend the time. You need to understand each individual motivation. So you need to understand, oh, this person is really looking to get to the next level. This person is looking, whatever, to have exposure to AI. This person struggles with stakeholder management. You need to understand and you need to coach effectively. So you can't just ignore, disappear for 1 month. You need to be present and really try to hear. Of course, you have limited time, but with the time that you have, you need to be able to invest in your people. And at least for me, something that I struggled with and still struggle is just acknowledge that you don't need to be a specialist in everything. Well, for sure, you're not a specialist in everything, because it might be that your team is better at data analysis than you are, or at storytelling, or at stakeholder management. You don't need to be better at something to empower your team to become better at that. You just need to acknowledge what they need and help them get it, whether it is exposure, attending that meeting, doing that course, whatever it is. Your job is not to be the teacher necessarily because you know it, because you're not going to know a lot of things, but at least to open the path for the people to support and continue their growth. Okay, so just some quick reflections and classic mistakes when being a product leader that I know I've done. One is know which job you're doing. Right now, are you the product strategist? Are you the org designer? Are you the manager? Really know when you're doing each thing, which role requires your attention right now, and spend the time there and be intentional about what you do. The second thing, design your calendar intentionally. As I mentioned, if the most important thing, and if I ask you, what is the most important thing for your company right now, and you say it's strategy, then your calendar should reflect that, not just those old meetings that you already had in your calendar that keep you busy. Busy is not impactful. So be mindful, be intentional about where you spend your time. And then the last thing is start to delegate or drop the things that don't serve your purposes, because I know it's not possible to do everything. You're busy. I know you're saying, oh, I cannot spend the time to draft that product strategy or do the market research, but if that's more important than the other things you have, drop them. When you're at this stage, it's not about doing everything. It's actually about choosing the things that are not relevant so that you have enough time to focus on the things that are truly relevant. So don't feel guilty about these. Delegate and drop the things that don't serve it. Okay, so hopefully this gave us a little bit of some insights at each stage. So when we start out, we want to make sure that we are useful and we're really trading what we have in abundance, time, for the knowledge, the relationships, the credibility that we need to then reach the second level. When we have the knowledge, when we're a great IC, then what we need to do is to start creating leverage, self improving systems, automating, scaling our impact. And by doing that, we get then eventually to a stage where we are leaders and where we own strategy and we manage people and we own the org. And here it's about saying no to the things that are not relevant, being intentional with our time, leading with context with our people, and really investing in them. Yeah. So these are just some of the reflections. Be useful, seek leverage, know your role, and then build great people because they're the ultimate way to scale your impact. And that's it. Those are just some of the reflections. Hopefully, some of the things here are useful to you. As I mentioned in the beginning, take everything with a grain of salt. See what applies to you, see what could apply at different stages of your career. And I'm super glad to hear any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for your very insightful talk. This was a very informative session and at least gave me quite some food for thought. So we are now starting our Q&A session. So please share your questions with us by sending them in the chat or by commenting on the platforms. You can see the QR code once more, and you can also join with Slido.com and with entering the code. And while you send us over your questions, I will share a bit more about product people to pass the time. So let's talk about the use cases when you may want to work with us. So our interim product managers and owners cover parental leave, scale your product management team quickly, or lead key initiatives while bridging the gap until a full-time employee joins. This happens quite some time. We cover usually for 3 to 12 months, depending on how long you need support. And with us, you can get temporary help to drive product discovery, also delivery for a deadline, and we can create big impact in a short time. We can also coach your product management team to reach their full potential through streamlining processes from 0 to 1, including product ops and product management. And we can also assist you with running the discovery to uncover the next impactful initiative for your product. We have worked with many different clients and industries, and some you may know from our B2C space, our eBay or Backmarket, or the search engine Ecosia. You might not be familiar with all B2B clients here, but you might know the World Health Organization or Remote.com at least. It's also worth noting that we supported over 300 cross-functional teams already and 70 clients from Series A startups to publicly listed companies. And we currently have 42 product leaders and product managers in-house to deliver high-quality services to our clients. And we do take pride in having 62% women in the team and 66% in leadership roles. So let's go back to the Q&A slide. And let's see if there are already questions coming in. I'm pretty sure you do have some. Everyone is trying to step up their game and get promoted.
I can see a few ones. It seems from LinkedIn, maybe that I can see. And if you're also able to see them.
Yeah, we can also start with those ones. I think the first one is, I can read just a comment in the meantime. Thanks for the valuable insights, not just for PMs, but also for interns and working students. It helps us better understand how managers think, reflect, and grow. Being proactive in taking ownership of our learning are always strong signals of growth mindset. And there is one question in the next comment. How do you adapt your approach when moving between Portugal's fluid, fast-thinking environment and Germany's process-first mindset? And when decision-making habits diverge, how do you keep strategy aligned without losing traction? That's a good question.
Yes, that's a really good question. Thank you so much, Zorlu. It's a really good question. So I think the main thing, definitely culture is a very important part of management and of decision making. And you clearly see the differences. And when you have an international team, that's something that you need to be conscious of. What I would say is a good way to approach this is to find the minimum common denominator. So you're for example comparing Portugal, more fluid, more informal, more maybe conversation, ritual based approach, to Germany, more process first mindset. So potentially it's important for you to know your team, but potentially if you have people in Germany that do require that structure of, hey, this is how we make decisions, and then you have the people in Portugal who actually, you might have a process, but if you're not talking, if you're not having a meeting, if you're not having an informal exchange, then they will feel left out. I think the best approach is to find that minimum common denominator. Is it that you have these minimum process that you follow for decision making, and you will follow that process, and that really ensures that more the German side is happy with how you're approaching it? And then do you also have that ritual where potentially you bring that decision to the group and you discuss it? So you create the forum more for that more Portuguese mindset of being more fluid and having that discussion. So I think that's a good way to try to approach it. What are the minimum common denominator that will make sure that both parts are able to make sure that they are part of the decision and that they're able to contribute? Um, and then when decision making habits diverge, how do you keep strategy aligned without losing traction? It's a really good one, relates to the first part. What I would say is be very clear on what are the non-negotiables of decision making. So be flexible a little bit on the details, but be really stubborn on the fundamentals. What do I mean by these? If you're, for example, a very common decision in product, you're deciding the product roadmap. A fundamental for me is there's no initiative in the roadmap that does not contribute to a top level business goal that we've set. So if you are presenting an initiative, you need to prove to me that this initiative is going to contribute, whatever, to increasing revenue, to decreasing operational effort, for example. So that is essential. So, and some people might approach it more from, hey, here's a Looker dashboard that proves it. Some people might approach it more from, we've run these decisions. And some people might take 2 weeks, some people might take 2 days. But the core principle is you need to prove and you need to connect these. So make sure that you set what are the non-negotiables on decision making, and then be flexible on the details.
That was a long answer to a complicated question, I think.
Yes.
So questions are coming in. You can still keep on putting them into Slido. Let's start with one regarding junior PMs. So someone is asking, what are the underrated skills that junior PMs should double down on to fast track their growth? I hear use of AI is very viral these days, but what else?
Okay, it's a great question. So one thing that I did mention, I want to say again, because I do think it's not said enough. It's follow through and reliability. Because the reality is, of course, everyone, most people are good professionals and they are trying their best, but it is very easy that over time, you have a lot of meetings and a lot of context and things fly over and some things are forgotten. Ensuring that you are fully reliable, that every agreed action item actually gets delivered and on time, I think is just still is the most important principle. Use of AI, most definitely. I think experimenting and just making sure, but we're product people. So I do have to say the cliche, it matters more about the outcome than the output. It's cool that you're showing this demo, but the coolest thing is, oh, we used to take 1 day to prototype these or to because we went to Figma, and now we actually take half an hour because I've actually built a prototype on Lovable. That's very cool. But it's about taking the 1 day to half an hour, not just about, oh, here's a bunch of cool links that happen. Then I think the proactiveness is a very important one. The reality is that potentially your manager or your mentors are very busy people, and it's hard for them to always be on top and be giving you this ultra structured way of progressing and of learning. Be proactive and be clear about the things that you are seeking. Ask for those things. So if you're junior and you really want to learn or you want more exposure to customers, ask for that exposure to customers. So junior people that self-assess and ask for the things that they need to grow, that's super appreciated, definitely.
Yeah, I can totally emphasize the reliable part. If you say you're doing something by the end of the day or by a certain date, do it. People will perceive you as reliable quickly, and that's great.
Absolutely.
um, yeah, that's an interesting one. What's one belief you held as a junior PM that you no longer believe today?
um, that senior product people have it all figured out.
That's a
I
good
think
one.
I think that's the honest answer. The reality is, at each stage of your career, you have to anchor in trying to make the best decisions possible, in seeking for the information that you need to make those decisions. And yes, throughout your career, you accumulate more knowledge, more experience, and more learnings. But at the end of the day, you're still going to have questions and doubts, and there's a lot of things that you don't know. So, yeah, more senior people don't have it all figured out.
Yeah, let's go on with some of those questions. What's something you didn't do early in your career that you wish you had started doing sooner? Would love to know your perspective.
Hmm.
It kind of relates to the icebreaker questions, I guess.
Yeah. So I think being opinionated about vision and strategy, being the main person driving vision and strategy, will ultimately fall more on top of the more senior people. But actually starting to get informed about the industry, about the competition, and starting to form opinions and convey those opinions and communicate them, I think is actually something that I could have done earlier. And that not only might help the senior people because they'll see a different angle, it's actually also super fun. To be honest, I think strategy work and vision work is super fun because you are setting a direction for the future and you're giving this opinionated view about how you think the product and the business can succeed. And I think, sure, be prepared that you might be missing key parts of the puzzle, so you might be missing something in your vision, but share it actually and be part of that exercise of setting the vision and direction.
I think I will take that to heart myself. um,
Wonderful.
Three times upvoted question even. How do you deal with a toxic manager organization, working remote, being also a different nationality, and the manager prioritizing colleagues in his main country? Tough one.
Whew. uh, First of all, I'm sorry that you are in that situation. I don't have a silver bullet. Um, I think what I would try to do is try to identify what are the core things that you are missing. Is it about, so you're I have little context, right? But I'll take a stab with the little context that I have. Let's say you're struggling because the colleagues are in the same country as your manager. Is it that, for example, there's a cultural misfit and it's easier for your colleagues than it's easier for you because you're working in different cultures? If so, try to understand, and similar to the other question that we had, try to understand what are the core ideas that you're maybe not meeting in that culture. Is it that they like to communicate in a little bit of a different way, more informal, less informal, more strict, more organized, more fluid, and try to meet it? So if, for example, the decision making there is more strict, then try to be more structured in how you present your ideas. If there are actually people that really care about that bonding and having a more fluid notion between work and life, can you propose a fun after work virtual meeting, for example, just for you to bond? I don't know, but try to see if it's a cultural gap. Then how can you sort of try to meet in the middle in terms of cultural differences? I think that could be a potential path.
Yeah, let's have couple of more. Yeah, we can have time for a couple of questions still. How do you manage overwhelming emotions and lead effectively as a product intern junior when you don't have much authority and often lack context?
Can you repeat the first part of the question, please?
Yes, how do you manage overwhelming emotions and lead effectively as a product intern junior when you don't have much authority and often lack context?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that's a feeling that we all have. I think that just want to start by acknowledging that, right? Not long ago, right? I was a junior and I was an intern, and very much today, right? I still suffer, and I would say that a lot of times just we suffer from imposter syndrome, right? I don't have the enough knowledge to be making these decisions. Should I even be here? And I think the first thing is acknowledging that everyone feels that. um, it's a very common feeling. The people that you see, books that you read, the people that wrote them also have that feeling. Um, and I think a principle is if you have follow through, if you have common sense, if you try to make reasonable, logical decision making, you will most of the time be making good decisions. Not to say that all of the knowledge that you lack is not relevant. It absolutely is, and it builds up and makes you a better professional. But the reality is, if you are making good decision making and if you ask for more context when you lack it, you will most likely be making good decisions and over time becoming a better professional. So don't be that scared. If you have a great intention, if you have good method, and if you have follow through, then you are most likely doing a good job. So I think that that will help. And then over time it gets a little bit better as you face the as you face this feeling. But definitely don't stop. It's a very common feeling.
Yeah, I can relate to that as well. um, Maybe a question more towards growth and when I'm ready. So, how do I know at what stage I'm in and that I'm ready for the next one?
So as I mentioned, I think the sort of the three buckets that I gave, they're just an approximation, right? The frameworks are the map, they're not the world. They're not reality. Um, so you can apply these to your role within a specific organization, or as you can zoom out to your career. I think a good way to look at the stage at which you are is, what are you missing? What do you feel you're missing to get to the next level? So if you have a lot of energy and you really want to drive change, but you're missing the knowledge and you're missing the context to be able to be better at your job, then I would take some of the learnings more from the junior section to get to the next stage. Even if you're whatever, if you've been in the organization for longer, or even if you're midway through your career, I think the learnings from the junior section will help if the main thing that you feel you're lacking is knowledge. um, if the main thing that you feel you're missing is impact, like you have the knowledge, you could be making great decisions, but it's really impact and amplifying the impact that you have in the organization. I think taking some of the learnings from the intermediate level will help you, because you already have the knowledge. What you're seeking is impact. And then I think if you already have the ability to create some impact, but you're not sure about how to do it, you're not sure about how or where you should be prioritizing, then I think you can take some of the learnings from the senior leadership section of the presentation. So think about what you're missing and build a plan for you to get that, whether it is knowledge, impact, prioritization. So identify that, and I think you'll be able to create the path to get it.
That sounds like a great Friday afternoon exercise for everyone.
Definitely.
Maybe one last question. That's an interesting one as well. Do you have an advice how to find a mentor outside of your field of competence?
Um, yes, I would say just reach out to that person, and if that person says no, then the person said no, and so what, you get to the next one. I think the main thing that prevents people from reaching out to other people is just fear, or just being fear of being rejected or of not getting an answer. I think that's the main thing that prevents. So my main thing is just do it. What's the worst that, like, at worst the person doesn't answer and you're in the same position you were at where you started. I think on the super tips on how to do cold outreaches to people that you don't know, I'm sure there's a lot of resources online, and I'm definitely not a specialist. So I'm sure there's a lot of great tips and tricks on how to make sure that the person answers. But I would say for most of us, the main thing that's blocking us is just, oh, well, if the person is too busy, they'll tell you they're too busy. So what? And if the person is not, maybe they'll answer and they'll say, sure, I can help you with these. So do reach out. And when you reach out, be specific, right? I think that also helps. Like just a generic, like, can you imagine how many messages Marty Kagan or Teresa Torres or any other influential product leader gets? They get a lot, right? And if the messages are not even specific about, hey, I'm struggling with this specific thing, then you didn't even devote the time to give the context on what you're trying to solve. So try to surpass the fear of reaching out and be specific about why you want help and on what, because the person might tell you, oh, actually I went through that, here's some advice, or let's have coffee. Or the person might tell you, hey, actually I it's not really something where I'm an expert, so maybe you can find another person.
That's a great answer. So let's finish up our Q&A session. So thank you all for your questions and also, of course, for your insights and answers. This is the end for today, and we'd like to also mention that we are hiring and always look out for talented PMs. You can apply by just scanning the QR code on the screen, And I was also, sorry, I would also like to invite you to subscribe to our newsletter where we share insights and our experiences in product that we gained during our missions at our clients. So next week on Tuesday, we will have Philipp Offermann as a guest, and he will be talking about how to think about product analytics. Feel free to join us for a session and many insights. So thank you very much, Gil, for an interesting talk, and big thank you to our audience for joining us today and engaging with questions. We hope to see many of you next time as well. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, and have a good rest of the day.